Hi everyone, welcome back to CrochetRocks. Tracy here, and in this video I'm going to show you some of my favourite little tips and tricks or hacks, whatever it is you want to call them, that I've picked up along the way. Now in my tutorials I normally show them. If there's anything that makes something easier along the way, I will show it. Or if I think that it's a beginner's video and you're perfectly capable at that stage of taking on this kind of way of doing things, I will incorporate it. So quite a lot of my videos contain these things anyway. So I'm going to show you a few bits and bobs, and in the description box below I'm going to kind of timestamp them. So if there's ever anything that you want to watch, you haven't got to wade through the whole video to get to that one. So I'll be doing that for you as well. So in the meantime though, if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell. So I'm going to start with one that I have done a video for recently, and that is doing the stack start. So that can be on any stitch that you want. So I'm going to show you, all I've done is attach this yarn, and I've put one simple little knot there. I like to knot mine. Some people don't, some people hate that, but I find that if I don't want anything to ever unravel on me, so that's what I always do. It's not a double knot, it's just a single, and I insert my hook into the corner of my stitch, or if I was inserting it I would go through the two loops just the same as normal, and I pull up a loop. I'll do a chain and I cinch it right down. So that's how I join my yarn. Now you don't have to do it that way, but this is the corner of a granny square after all. So I'm going to work over the tail, because one of my tips, tricks and hacks is that I hate sewing in ends, and I will always try where I can to work over them. So as this is a corner, I'll show you how I do my corners, and this is going to have a row round it of UK treble crochets, which are double crochets in the US. So one of my first tips to you is that if you are new to crochet or new to different terminology, is to write them down in a little book and keep them handy so that you can always convert them. So I'm going to show you the stack, and this is, you insert into the, it might be into the stitch, but in this case it's into the chain space. I'm going to yarn over and pull up a loop. So it just have two loops on the hook, and it just looks like a normal UK double or US single. I'm going to yarn over and go through both of those. So I have done my first stitch, but I'm going to go and do a little bit more. So in this vertical bar here, just this one bar, I'm going to insert my hook, yarn over and pull up another loop, yarn over and pull through both of those. So that is how you can do a stack start. So you can now carry on and do your UK trebles or US doubles. I'm going to show you another way. Okay, so some people like to do a different kind of start. Where's my tail? There it is. Let's not get it confused with my working yarn. So some people like to just do one chain and then forget about that chain and do their first stitch, and then do their second stitch. So when you go all the way around, you'll be working into this, not that chain, you'll ignore that, you'll be working into this stitch here. So that's just two ways. Some people prefer that because it looks a lot like a UK treble or US double, but there is this little bulky bit on the side, and that is true of the stack. So I will show you that stack stitch one more time. Now remember, this is how I like to start my work. So I go in, yarn over, pull through two, go into this sidebar, yarn over and pull it through, yarn over and pull through both. So although you still get this little side bit, it's not quite as pronounced in my opinion. So for my next one, I'm going to pause this video and I'm going to get all the way around and catch up with you when I get to this part. So this is the corner of my granny square, and as you see I have done 1 and 2. Traditionally we would do 3 stitches. As you can see, it's a different stitch, but there are 3 there. You would do 3 in a corner, but I'm going to do 2. Now I'm going to go all the way around, and I'm going to do 3 in this corner, go all the way along, do 3 in this corner, all the way along, 3 in this corner, and I'll catch up with you when I get back to this point here. I'm going to show you how to make it seamless. Okay, so I've made it all the way around, and I'm going to show you now how this will become seamless, and you will have done this all the way through. So this is how I do it. I've done my 2, I'm now going to do my 3rd, and all I have to do now is slip stitch into my first stitch. Now because we did the stack, we have the 2 loops just here, exactly the same, a bit tight, excuse me a second when I push my way in, not normally. There we go, we've got the 2 loops that we would normally have at the top of every stitch, not the stop, the top of the stitch. So you can see you've got the V's, and this is exactly the same. So all we have to do now is slip stitch into that. So that's one way of making your join, okay? But you've got a seamless granny square. So this is now dead center. So if you were carrying on, you could carry on going round and round, and you would be in that corner and you wouldn't see it. If this was out the way, it would look exactly the same as every other corner. But this brings me to my next little trick. Instead of joining with a slip stitch and ending off, what you'll get if you do that is this. You'll get this little bump, and you'll get your yarn sticking out of it. Now when I sew mine in, I can get rid of that, but it's not the cleanest of joins. So how do we make it a nice clean join? Okay, well, before we've joined it, we just cut our yarn and we'll pull this completely out, okay? And we'll get ourselves our darning needle. Now this one doesn't have the biggest eye, so a little tip then, if you find it difficult, some people do it by kind of doing this, or I can't remember how they do that, but all I do is twist my yarn nice and thin and I push it in. It's ever so simple. Well, it is if you have a fingernail. There you go. So now we're going to make this look like every other corner. So front to back, we're going to go through these 2 loops of our stitch, and then we're going to come back to the one the yarn is coming out of. Can you see that? So we've gone front to back through that stitch, and now we're going to take this one and we're going to go front to back, but not through both, just through that back one, and then we just pull it until we've got the tension right, and it looks like all the other stitches. And now you can, without pulling it tighter, secure this one by any way you want. So I would go down my stitches, completely invisible. You can pull it a little bit tighter. There we are, so it's the same size. And now we have to just go through these stitches, and I go to my corner. This is the reverse of the work, so you don't get to see this part. But I will now make a little knot there because I want it to be absolutely secure. And I do that by making my loop, coming back through it the other way and just pulling it. If you do it in such a way, you won't see it. And then you can just work this tail through. So when I'm securing it, I will go through, and then what I'll do is I'll break this stitch, or I'll go into the next one, but I'll break through into this stitch, and I will use my darning needle to go through all of those stitches, and then I will go through the other side just one more time. So again, I'll break through so that it's got a little bit of that stitch in between it, just a little bit, and I will go back through the other way, and then I'll pull that so you can't see it, And what I like to do as well is to pull it that little bit tighter and then snip it off, and then that end will disappear inside that corner. And you've got a corner that you can't tell at all where that join is. Okay, so the next one we're going to do, did I say okay twice? I did it at the end. I paused it and I said it again. Do apologise. But the next one I'm going to show you are alternatives and the magic loop, magic ring. Lots of people struggle with that. I've seen a lot of comments lately on Facebook and on sort of other groups on YouTube where people are struggling. Mine is the easiest way you will ever find, and I've started doing it this way and showing it. Well, I've been doing it all my life, but ever since I've been crocheting. But since I've been showing you on here, I've seen other people do this and teach it now. So that's cool. It's making its way around. So it's ever so simple. You just make a ring. You see? Quite simple. Make a ring. Put the hook in. Bring the yarn through. And then you chain one. And you've done it. There's none of this finger wrapping and going round and round or making crosses and doing all that. You don't need to. Simple. I'll show you again. You make a ring, you insert your hook, you bring your yarn through and chain one. Of course you can do it without the bringing your hook involved at all. You can just put the yarn through and then put your hook in and make a chain. It's simple. It's really, really easy. But if you don't like it, the other way that I know is that's my slip knot, chain two, and then we work into this stitch here. Simple, really. And that means you can then pop in, do whatever stitch you want. You can even do your stack if you want to, and that we've already done. And the more you put into this first chain, the bigger that ring will get. You can just continue making a ring. It's not as effective, I don't think, but you know, if you don't like that magic ring, this is another way of doing it. So now we're working over, oops a daisy, we're working over the tail, just as if we were with the magic ring. I've lost count how many I've done. Doesn't really matter. I don't think it's as effective as I will show you. Right, I'm going to join with a slip stitch, which is what we normally would do. Now if we pull that, it's still pulled tightly shut. It's exactly the same. But I find if it's the magic ring, it's just that little bit tighter. But that's the other alternative method. Okay, so for the next one, this only really works if you have a crochet hook that doesn't have an ergonomic handle. Well, it does if you've got an ergonomic handle, but you've got a long enough neck. I don't like to call it shaft. I like to call it a neck. So we make our slip knot. I'm going to show you this little trick. Now, if you want to make sure, if you're making a long chain and you've got to make it into a ring, and you want to make sure that it's not going to twist, you can make a start just doing your chain. Once you've done a few, you can take your hook out and insert your hook into the first one, and then back into the working loop, and then just carry on making your chain. But you need to make sure that this stays out of the way. Didn't want to go through for some reason. There we go. It's because I've got a different hook. I'm not used to working with this one. It's an inline. I like it. It's a lantern moon, if you're wondering. But yeah, it is a bit fiddly. You can keep it down with your finger once you get to a certain point. It's much easier, but it's only at the beginning. It's a little bit harder because there's not an awful lot of distance between the chain you're working on and the beginning chain. Okay, so now you've done the desired amount of chain, you just simply pull it through and you've made your ring without any twisting. So that's quite a good cool way of doing it. Okay, another way is by making foundation stitches. So they are great if you need something a little bit more elastic. For instance, if you're making fingerless mittens or mittens and you want the cuff to be quite elastic, and you can do that with any stitch. And it also is great for joining the round, but I'll show you that at the end. So to do, I'm just going to turn my fan off because I've just realised that it might be annoying you. Okay, so to do it, we make 2 chain. Okay, now we're going to work in this first one. So I'm going to show you with a UK treble or US double. So we yarn over and we go into that chain and we pull up our loop as if we're doing a normal stitch. Now what we do is we pull through 1 loop. So we've made a chain. I like to hold on to that because it becomes easier about where you're going next. So now we just complete our stitch. So we're going to pull through 2 and pull through 2. Now we want this chain we just created. So we're going to yarn over, but we need to go through 2 loops of that chain. There we go. We need to go through the 2 loops, and that is very important because if you don't go through the 2 loops, you get a really baggy, nasty edge. So now we're going to chain 1, exactly the same. I'm going to just hold on to it, and we're going to yarn over and pull through 2, yarn over and pull through 2, and then we're going to do the same thing again. So we need to go through the 2 loops, just as before. Pull up our loop, and we're going to chain 1. I'm going to hold it, and I'm going to pull through 2, pull through 2, and I'm going to keep doing that. But every time you do this, you need to make sure that you're going through those 2 loops. Otherwise, it will look ugly and not even. It's quite fiddly at first, but you soon get used to doing it. Just make sure there are the 2 loops. And if you need to, once you've done your chain, just hold on to it until you get used to where you're going and what your stitches look like doing this. It's best just to hold on to it. Okay, do 1 chain. So once you've done a fair few of these, you can then turn this into the ring. I'll do a few more. Actually, I can think I've done enough. If you were now turning this into a ring, even a small one, you can just slip stitch into this one. With my stitches that the tutorials, sorry, that I've done before, I've used this as a way of making a back loop and just going into a spiral. If I can remember at the end of this video, I will put a link to some of my fingerless mittens that show that. But as previously mentioned, you can do that foundation stitch with any stitch that you want. So if we were doing what we call in the UK a half treble, half double, same way. Make sure you go through the 2. Gets a bit fiddlier when you've got a small stitch to keep an eye on what you're doing. Go into the 2 loops. That's 1. Finding it hard to catch that one. See what I mean? It's a bit fiddlier with smaller stitches. There we go. And we just chain 1. Whoops. Chain 1. I'm going to hold it. And then I'm going to come back into that 1 chain through the 2 loops. 1 chain. Through the 2 loops. And that's how we do it with a UK double treble or UK half treble or a US half double. And again, if you wanted to, you could do this with what we call a double, but in the US you call it a single. And again, quite fiddly, but you do the same principle. One chain, make your stitch, go through the 2 loops, one chain through the 2 loops. Exactly the same principle, but the smaller the stitches, the more fiddly that is at the beginning. Although I find this stitch less fiddly than the half treble or half double. I don't know why, but I do. So that's how we do our foundation stitches. Of course, you just apply it to any stitch. So if it was what we call a double treble, or in the US you call it a treble, it's exactly the same way. You start with the 1 chain and then you work into that chain. Okay, so I'm going to show you how you can get a nice clean edge, and some patterns that you find will ask you to go in the back bump. So this is what you're normally familiar with, and this is the front of our stitch. If you turn it over, you can see there's this series of humps. So just the same way as the first stitch doesn't count, we're going to go into the back bump of the next stitch, and we're going to pull up our loop and make our stitch. And once you've done it, you'll find they sit up nicely for you. You can see them quite easily, and you just go in to that back bump only and make your stitch. But because you've now turned your work so that it sits up nicely, you can see them quite well. But that's how we do the back bumps, and they're nice and proud for you. But once you've done that, you can see that you get this really nice bottom edge. There's your normal stitch, but it just looks nicer for certain projects. Have a practice with this and you'll soon find that it's ever so easy. When I very first started trying to do the back bumps, I got into a bit of, I was very confused about it. I was only young when my mother taught me to crochet, but I just couldn't see a reason for it, and it was fiddly to me. But now, once you've done the first one, you can quite easily catch the rest. But that's it. Makes a nice little edge for you. Okay, so I'm going to show you some decreasing. We're used to increasing in our round, but sometimes we might have to decrease. So I'm going to do my first stitch. Get me up there. Now this is particularly handy when you're making, for instance, any kind of shoes, whether it's baby shoes or making slippers. So what we need to do is, if you're going to decrease, now this is the stitch that I've been doing, so I'll continue in this. I normally go through this front loop only, okay? So I'm going to yarn over and go through that front loop, yarn over and pull up my stitch, and then I'm going to go through the next front loop only, yarn over and pull up my stitch, yarn over and pull through all 3. And it becomes a much cleaner decrease because it's not as bulky. You can't see it, and it's much nicer to look at than the traditional kind of way of going through all of the stitch. I will show you what it looks like if we go through the whole stitch. Just feels a lot bulkier to look at, which if you're making something that's quite delicate, like a pair of baby booties, it's a lot nicer to look at. Okay, so if we're working what we call a double crochet or a single crochet, this is how a normal decrease looks. It's kind of bulky. You normally do that by going through, pulling up a loop, into the next one, pulling up a loop, yarn over, pull through all of them. And it looks more like a half treble or a half double crochet. And that's what it looks like inside your work. It's like a fatter stitch. But if we do it this way, we insert our hook through the front loop. Bear with me one moment. I'm sorry about that. I had a parcel come, so I'll start again. We don't want this bulky one, so we're going to do it this way. We're going to insert our hook into that front loop. We've got the 2 loops there, just at the normal V. We're going into this front one, and we're not doing anything, but we're going to go into the next front loop. So the back loops are there, and we're going to yarn over and pull through, yarn over and pull through, and then we're going to go into the next stitch. We do a couple, you'll see that looks much cleaner, like a normal stitch. You can't really tell it apart, unlike this big fat one over here, which looks a mess. We'll show you again. Going into the normal stitch, the normal way, into the next one, normal way, yarn over, pull through all 3. So you've got this bulky, looks like half a little star stitch. Not nice. So we're going to go into the front loop only, not work it, into the next front loop only, not work it, yarn over and pull through both of those, yarn over and pull through. Looks just like a normal stitch and invisible. Much cleaner. Okay, so I'm going to show you a couple of ways of changing colour. So I've done a few more stitches to get past this part, because where we were working into those loops, they become a little baggy. Now this is on a straight, on a round, it doesn't matter. So normally we would go do our stitch, but we'd leave it with the loops on the hook. Bring in, take off our colour off of my, I've got a yarn genie, so you just have to bear with me a second while I switch them over. And I'm going to bring in my new colour, and this is the same regardless of the stitch you are working on. Now what I always do if I'm changing colour this way is I will hold that yarn that I'm changing in my finger, because otherwise your stitches can get a little baggy. And then I'm going to hold both. Now there's my yarn that I'm changing, and this is the new one, and I'm just going to complete that stitch by bringing that new colour through. So I'm not going to knot it, which I normally would. I'm just going to start using the new yarn. So that's what that will look like. That's how we change colour in a traditional way, and if that's new to you, that's great. So I'm just going to show you another way. I need to move this part of my yarn genie out of the way. Okay, so let's get undo these, and I will show you and the other way. I don't think it looks an awful lot different, and I will show you on other stitches as well. So we'll show you on a traditional UK treble or US double crochet, because you know usually we'll pull through 2 loops and then we'll stop and we'll get our new one. I'll hold this and we'll bring in our new colour exactly the same way with that stitch as with the previous. But there is another way, and that is we start our stitch and we pull through our 2 loops and we pull through again. We pull this so it's a nice long loop, and then these 2 loops we've just gone into, we'll reinsert our hook and bring in our new colour, yarn over and pull through, and then you can start working in your new colour exactly the same. I'll do a few, and then what you do with this yarn is you just simply pull it through. Get your yarn and you just pull it through. So I don't think it looks any different than the other join. Let's do some to show. So we've gone through our 2 loops. I'm going to hold on to this, and now I'm going to bring in my new colour. It did go a little baggy because I didn't hold on to it good enough. never mind. But it will actually change the look of it. So I'll do that again. I want it to be absolutely perfect when we look at it, because that's what counts. Okay, so I'm holding on to this yarn, bringing my new one in, holding them both how I normally would. Okay, and then just starting off with my new colour. Couldn't really have made it any tighter than that. Okay, so there we go. That is what our traditional way looks like. So if we do the new way, whoops, without splitting the yarn, of course, it's because I've got a camera in between us. That's why. So I'm going to go through those 2 loops that I've just been through. I'm going to bring this yarn in. Obviously, I wouldn't be using the same yarn. I would have cut it, ended off, sewn in the end, whatever, or worked them in. Do a few. And I'll pull this out. So there you go. I think they look the same. It's just a matter of which way you prefer. This still comes out of the previous stitch. That's a little bit baggier because I haven't secured that yarn. Let's take this and make a nice big stitch. So if I had secured that, that's what that would look like. And that looks exactly the same. So it's just purely which one you prefer. Okay, so long chains. Sometimes if you've got to do like a large garment or blanket and you need a really long chain, it can be really, really annoying to keep losing count. Also, if you have, for instance, I do this as well when I'm doing a mile a minute, because obviously you've got a long strip of work. So I get my little stitch markers, and I've got an array of them here, which some of them I've made and some I've not. So what I will do is I will chain, for instance, 10. Now I've got to 10, I'll pop in a stitch marker at that point. Now you can, if you've got a long way to go, make it 20, and I'll carry on 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Get my stitch marker. Just so happens they match, which is purely coincidental. And there you go. So from that moment on, you just carry on doing the same thing. It also means, there's a bonus, that you can just sit there watching TV and you don't need to worry. All you have to do is count 10. And then all you've got to do is go 10, 20, 30, just to make sure you've got your right stitch count. Again, if you would rather, you can do it in 20 increments, and you go 20, 40, 60, and so on. Okay, so while we're on the subject of stitch markers, I had a ring at the door just now. So if I had to do something and I was right here in my project, even if I was just at the end, I've got to put it down. And there is a risk that someone could come along and undo a little bit, or a little mishap could happen. So just a simple stitch marker through your working loop will secure that, and it will never come undone. And if you're new to crochet and you find it hard to figure out which is your last stitch, now I will say that working with the stack that I started this with, that is a lot easier, because when you get to the end, you don't have a chain to go through like a turning chain. You have the 2 loops of your stitch just like this. So what you can do is, once you've finished that stitch, you can use a stitch marker at either end, so you know where your first stitch and your last stitch is. So I will then put that into this stitch. I can put it just through one loop or two, it doesn't matter, and then carry on. Now when I'm doing my stitches and I'm doing a UK half treble, I don't do the stack, but to stop me from getting those unsightly loops or bulging, I will do one chain, cinch it right down, and then I'll do my I won't make sure that this loop here is not really tight, and I'll make my first stitch, not through the stitch marker. Okay, you can put one in the last stitch, I will show you. Okay, so then we'll go into the next one and the next, all the way along. Okay, so all we've got to do now is move this stitch marker up. You can do it at the beginning and the end of every single row, if that helps you, but possibly just the beginning would be more beneficial, because it will be the end of the next. You can do it after you've done your first stitch, you don't have to wait, but I find doing it the way that I do, either with the stack or that one cinched down little chain, it becomes obvious where your last stitch is. So it does look a little more slanted, but you can see there's your V's. They're identical V's. So that is my second to last, and this is my last stitch, which will now become my first. Okay, do my chain and I'll cinch it down. It just basically stops that yarn from running back and making this stitch really tight. So again, I will do my first stitch. Okay, so I can pop in a stitch marker. I'll choose this one. I sometimes have trouble with these ones, but let's hope not this time, because I don't want to... Where are we? It was easier when I had them all out on the counter, wasn't it? We won't use that one. Sometimes they can be annoying. Okay. Those ones that I got free in a magazine, and I don't find them big enough. Okay, so now when I get to the end of the row, I'll know that's my stitch to go into. But it's not, for some reason, it's not something I've ever had a problem with personally, even when I was younger. And I think that's because of the way that I've always done my ends. I've always done it. I've always started with that cinched down chain. I didn't like the way the chain looked. I didn't like the fact that it was confusing. So I just did, there we go. There is our last stitch, nice and highlighted to me. And there you can see there's the V. So I find you might, if you do it my way, you might not even need this stitch marker. But that's how I keep my edges lovely and straight. It works with any stitch. I do the same thing, incidentally. Cinch it down and make sure this isn't tight. And I do the same thing with the UK double crochet, which is a single. In the US, exactly the same. Obviously, that still slants down a little bit. If it helps you, pop in the stitch marker, just so you know where it is, because obviously it is a smaller stitch, and you want to make sure that you keep hold of it. But I find I don't even need that. Okay, that's just one little thing you can do with your stitch markers. Okay, so I've gone back and I'm going to show you how I carry my yarn up. And sometimes I do this when I've ended a colour and I want to work it in, because I hate sewing in ends. So I will start my stitch. I'll finish it there. Bring in my new colour. Oh, I've I've got to end it. Bear with me a second. I still had the ring we were working with earlier. So yeah, I do the same thing. I hold that yarn with my finger so it doesn't become baggy. Bring in my new colour, hold them both, and I finish my stitch with my new colour, which I'm holding too tightly now. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to turn my work and I'm going to carry that yarn. So I'll do it before I turn my work actually. I'm going to do a chain. So normally you would just chain there, but I'm going to bring up this colour over my hook first. I usually bring up my tail as well, so I'm going to do that. I didn't want to confuse you with two different yarns, but one is the tail of the new colour and one is the other yarn. So if you want to carry that with you, you just loop it over your hook. You're not going through the stitch, and it has now brought it up to the next level. Okay, so obviously if I was changing my colour, I might have knotted those and kept them a little tighter. So I just give them a tug and they'll pull down. But I've brought that up to the next level. So if I wanted to, I could work over them on this one here. So I would just go into my first stitch and work over them. Exactly the same. Now that does look a little bit untidy because I didn't secure them. But if I give them a little tug, if I did it in the normal way, I would have tied them off and they wouldn't have been visible in any way. So I've worked over. We'll get rid of these tails now. We don't want to see that. And I'll just carry on with my new colour. And you've brought your colour up on that previous round. I'm going to pause it because it's a little boring to watch this, but I'm going to come back. I'm going to come back along this this line of crochet back to this point. So I'm going to pause it and I'll catch up with you when I get back to here. Okay, bit of a confession to make. I made a mistake there. So I've gone back and I'm going to show you. I'm not going to take that out. I'm going to leave it in to show you that we all make mistakes. So I'm going to start again. I've made my first part of that stitch. I'm going to bring in my new colour and I'm going to finish off in that new colour. I'm going to treat this as if I was working, and I'm going to give that a little knot because that's what I would normally do. So it's best to do it as you would normally do it. Okay, so now I've got my new colour. I want to bring my old colour up with me. So I'm going to turn my work. This is how I would normally do it. I'm going to leave this end because I don't want to confuse. Okay, so I'm going to do my first chain and cinch it just like I would normally, and I'm going to put make my first stitch as if I would, but instead of going through all my stitches, I'm going to loop that yarn over and finish my stitch. It's now come up to the right level. So the only thing you have to watch out for is that you want this the right way round. You want that over that side. So in order to do that, I've just got to move my yarn. Okay, so I'm going to do that. I'm going to put that over there, and now this is on that side. It's easier with balls than it is with yarn genie or a wool genie. So now I'm going to carry on with my not that. That's my one I don't want, isn't it? It's very confusing to me at the moment. I don't know why. Probably because I'm trying to tell you. Okay, so I'm just going to leave those tails and I'm going to carry on working in this new colour all the way to the end and back, so I can show you how we've carried the yarn up. So as you can see, it's no longer right down, it's a little way up. Okay, so this is the boring part where I just working all the way along. So I'm going to pause it and catch up with you when I get to this end, which is what I was meant to be doing. Okay, so I'm nearly there. Okay, so I've got one there and my last stitch. So what I'm going to do is, because I've brought this yarn up with me, I'm going to finish my last stitch. Now, if I was changing colour, I'd just finish it off with the new yarn. Do my chain and cinch it down and turn, and then I can carry this back up the other way as well. So I do that by doing my first stitch as usual, putting this across my hook. I'm not bringing it through, I'm just going through all of them. Now I've carried that one up, and all I have to do is switch them over. So that is on that side and over here, and this yarn is my working yarn. So, and I carry on. That's how I always carry my yarn up the side, because if you do it the other way, you get that loop of the other colour following up. The loop follows you up, which is untidy. And if you're not working along the side, if you're not picking up stitches, you're not going to hide it. And even if you are working along the side, picking up stitches, sometimes it doesn't hide. But if you do it this way, you can't see it. It's just clean. It is at the back. There's this tiny little kind of follow-up line, but that's the back. So that's how I bring up my yarn. And I also bring it up. If I was ending off, I will show you what I do. We'll go back. Right, so let's get rid of this altogether. Okay, so do my last stitch. I'm going to bring that over. I'm going to carry that up. Okay, it's brought up. No, I've done it wrong, haven't I, already? That is if I was bringing it up. Okay, so I'm going to change my colour. Okay, so this is my new colour. I'm going to do my chain and cinch it down. And if I had just brought in a new colour, if I hadn't been carrying it up with me, and this was now my new way of working, I'm going to get my yarn. I'm going to not throw my yarn genie across the room. That's now out of the way. So I'm going to take that off, my genie, and use my actual colour. No more confusion. All gone. So now I've brought my new colour in, and here is my yarn. So I'm going to do my first stitch, and I'm going to grab that tail, not this one. Remember, that was, we just left that. I'm going to put that over my yarn, over my hook rather, and I'm going to bring up my stitch, and I'm going to work it. And now I'm going to just work over the tail as I go. So I'll bring it up to that level, and then I'll work over it. You won't see it. Now I'll show you another little trick that I have for when I'm working in ends. So when you sew them in, sometimes you go that way and then you come back on yourself. So what I do is I loop this yarn. It's fiddly at first, but I'll make a loop of it, and then I'll work over both strands. Okay, and then the next one, I'm working over both, working over that loop. And then, because there's a little tiny bit that's sticking out there, I just pull it so you can't see it anymore. So it disappears. And then I just snip it off. It will disappear. Sorry, I just bashed my camera. It will disappear in. But now, I haven't got that little tuft sticking out. I've worked over both. So it's just the equivalent. And you can do it for a longer period than that. You can actually loop it and then work over both. Snip off that little tail. But that's just another little way that I work in an end without worrying about it coming back later to haunt me. Okay, So I think that's enough tips and tricks for one video, because I've been rattling on, babbling away in the corner, as I like to put it, for almost an hour. So if I find later on that I'll make another video with all the other tips and tricks, because believe me, there are a lot more. Thank you so much for watching. As I said before, if you haven't already, don't forget to hit the subscribe button and the notification bell, and hopefully you'll be informed when new videos pop up.